There is a moment in every life when someone you never expected to lose slips out of your story. Not because you stopped caring, not because the connection meant nothing, not because you failed, but because that season ended before your heart was ready. You pictured them in your future. You imagined milestones with them beside you. You tied dreams, plans, possibilities to their presence. You trusted the feeling that said, "This person is part of my journey." And for a while, it truly felt that way. Their presence felt familiar, their words felt safe, their energy felt like home, their support felt like destiny. But then, without warning, without clarity, without a reason that made sense, the connection shifted, the conversations faded, the bond weakened, the distance grew, the energy changed, and the person you thought would always be part of your world became a memory instead of a presence. It felt unfair. It felt random. It felt like the universe was taking something precious from you without explanation, because losing someone who mattered deeply feels like a kind of heartbreak that doesn't come with closure. But what you didn't know then, what your heart couldn't see in that moment, was that the removal was not rejection, not abandonment, not failure. It was protection. A protection you couldn't recognize because your love for them blinded you to the cost of keeping them in your future. Their presence felt comforting, but their path wasn't aligned with yours. Their energy felt warm, but their intentions weren't equal to your heart. Their role in your story felt permanent, but their purpose was temporary. And heaven knew that if they stayed any longer, you would give pieces of yourself that were never meant to be given away. You weren't losing them. You were being saved. There are people in your life who felt good to your heart, but dangerous to your future. Not because they were villains, not because they were evil, not because they wished you harm, but because their presence came with a price you could not see while you cared. A price paid slowly, quietly, silently. A price taken from your peace, your confidence, your identity, your purpose. Some people drain you without ever raising their voice. Some people limit you without ever saying a word. Some people hold you back not by force, but simply by being in the wrong place in your story. But you couldn't see that then. Your heart was too loyal. Your spirit was too open. Your intentions were too pure to recognize the imbalance. So you tried. You stayed. You compromised. You adjusted yourself again and again to maintain a connection that heaven was already trying to remove from your path. Because God saw what you didn't. He saw how much of yourself you would have sacrificed just to keep them close. He saw the dreams you would have delayed, the growth you would have buried, the opportunities you would have missed because your loyalty was tied to someone who wasn't meant to follow you into the next season. He saw the way your spirit dimmed every time you shrank your voice to keep the peace. He saw the silent hurt you prayed your way through so you wouldn't lose them. He saw the emotional weight you carried alone just to make the connection work. You weren't imagining the heaviness. You were just ignoring it because you cared, because you believed the best, because you wanted to protect someone who could not protect your heart in the same way. The truth is this. You were paying a hidden cost to keep them in your life, a cost heaven never intended you to pay. So God removed them, not to hurt you, but to spare you from a future where you would have lost too much of yourself trying to love someone who was never meant to stay. There comes a moment after someone leaves when the silence feels heavier than their presence ever did. At first, it feels wrong. It feels empty. It feels like something precious has been ripped out of your hands before you were ready to let go. The routine changes, the conversations stop, the comfort disappears, and you begin to feel the ache of a space you had learned to fill with their existence. But then, slowly, quietly, without ceremony, something unexpected begins to happen. Your mind becomes clearer, your heart becomes lighter, your spirit becomes calmer. Your days begin to feel less heavy than they did when that person was still part of your world. The peace that felt impossible before starts slipping back into your life one breath at a time. You wake up one morning and realize you didn't feel anxious. You go through a day without replaying old conversations. You feel relief without understanding why. And that's when the truth hits you. Not all healing comes from what enters your life. Some of the deepest healing begins with what leaves. Their absence became the space your spirit needed to breathe again. The emotional noise quieted, the confusion faded, the tension dissolved. The version of you that was shrinking began to rise again. It didn't happen suddenly. There was no dramatic shift. But as time passed, you realized something simple and profound. You felt better without them than you ever felt with them. And that realization is not an attack on who they were. It is clarity about who you are. God did not remove them to punish you. He removed them because their presence was interfering with your healing, your growth, your purpose, your identity, your peace. Their absence was not abandonment. It was recovery, recalibration, realignment. And the more your heart healed, the more you understood. Losing them was the beginning of finding yourself again. There are few pains as heavy and quiet as giving a love that doesn't come back to you in the same depth. Not because the other person was cruel, not because they took pleasure in hurting you, but because they simply did not have the capacity to hold the weight of the love you were willing to carry. You poured honesty, loyalty, patience, compassion, and hope into someone who could only offer fragments in return. You saw their potential and mistook it for consistency. You saw their softness and mistook it for commitment. You saw their brokenness and mistook it for intimacy. You gave the kind of care that heals people, but they gave the kind of presence that slowly empties you. And the most painful part was that you didn't notice it at first. You were too busy loving, too busy believing, too busy hoping, too busy trying to understand their wounds so you wouldn't judge their distance. Your heart was ready, theirs was elsewhere. So the imbalance grew, and the weight of the connection began falling entirely on your side. You carried their silence and called it patience. You carried their distance and called it loyalty. You carried their inconsistency and called it grace. You carried their confusion and called it love. But heaven saw the truth. You were giving more than your heart could continue to survive. God knew that if this person stayed, you would keep offering the deepest parts of yourself to someone who could not return even the surface of what you were giving. So he removed them, not to shame you, not to harden you, not to make you lose faith in love, but to stop you from draining your soul in a relationship that would never match your spirit. You hadn't failed. Your heart was simply too big for a place too small, and the love you gave was never wasted. It was seen by heaven, held by God, and stored for the one who will cherish it the way you do. There is a question that lives quietly at the bottom of your heart. If they were so important to me, why didn't God let them stay? You don't ask it out loud. You carry it in silence. You feel it in certain songs, certain places, certain memories that still breathe even after the person is gone. You think, if this connection was so strong, if my feelings were this real, if I cared this much, then why didn't heaven fight for us? But what you don't see yet is that God did fight for you. He just wasn't fighting for the relationship, he was fighting for your heart. Because there are people you would have never let go of unless God removed them. People you would have defended even while they were draining you. People you would have chosen even while they were choosing other things. People you would have waited for endlessly, even while they kept you emotionally standing in the same place. God knew that if he allowed them to stay, you would keep shrinking yourself to fit inside their comfort zone. You would keep lowering your standards so they wouldn't feel challenged. You would keep asking for less than what your soul was created to receive. So he stepped in. He let the distance grow. He let the tension rise. He let the misalignment show. He allowed the conversations to fade, the paths to separate, the timing to break. Not because he delights in your tears, but because he saw the ones you would cry later if this person stayed. He didn't let them stay because the future he wrote for you requires a version of you that is whole, clear, aligned, and free. Not emotionally exhausted, constantly confused, or quietly doubting your own worth. Sometimes God has to protect you from the love you think you want to make room for the love your soul actually needs. So no, they didn't leave because you were unlovable. They didn't leave because you weren't enough. They didn't leave because your heart failed. They left because heaven intervened. And one day, when your spirit is healed enough to see what God was shielding you from, you will finally understand. God didn't take them away to punish you. He took them away to protect the rest of your life. There is a version of you that God refused to let exist. A version of you who would have stayed in that relationship, in that connection, in that friendship, in that situationship, no matter the cost. A version of you who would have kept explaining yourself to someone who never really listened, who would have kept apologizing just to keep the peace, who would have kept lowering your standards so they wouldn't feel uncomfortable. A version of you who would have carried the whole weight of the connection on your shoulders and called it love. You don't see it clearly now, but heaven saw it long before you did. They weren't just capable of hurting your feelings. They were capable of slowly reshaping your identity, not in one big moment of betrayal, but in 100 tiny moments of neglect. You would have stopped expressing your needs because it's not worth the argument. You would have stopped dreaming out loud because they don't really understand. You would have stopped being honest because they don't know what to do with the truth. You would have stopped shining because your light made their shadows too obvious. You would have learned to live as a quieter, smaller, dimmer version of yourself just to keep them comfortable. And God said, "No, I didn't create you for this." So He stepped in. Not because you asked. You were too busy trying to make it work. Not because you were ready. You were still holding on. Not because you saw the danger. You only saw the good. He stepped in because He refused to watch you slowly disappear inside a connection that was never strong enough to hold your whole heart. He removed them to save the version of you He is still writing, the bold you, the healed you, the peaceful you, the clear-minded you, the spiritually awake you, the you that doesn't have to beg to be chosen, heard, valued, or protected. They weren't just a threat to your present, they were a threat to the person you were becoming. So when they left, even if it felt brutal, even if it felt sudden, even if it felt like your world collapsed, something holy actually happened. The version of you that would have died slowly for them never got the chance to exist. And one day, when you meet the you God protected in that moment, you will know deep in your spirit. Their departure was heaven saving the real you. When someone leaves your life, the first thing you notice is what's missing. The messages stop, the calls fade, the routines shift. Your days feel quieter, emptier, strange. You feel the absence like a weight. You feel the silence like an echo. You feel the empty space, as if something vital has been taken from you. But there is a mystery in God's ways. The same space that grief exposes is the space He often uses to grow your calling. Because as long as your heart was wrapped around them, there were parts of you that could not fully awaken. You were too busy managing emotions to hear the deeper pull of purpose, too busy holding the connection together to notice the doors opening elsewhere, too busy investing in a future with them to imagine a future God was building without them. When they left, it felt like everything stopped. But in truth, something started. Space opened up in your schedule, in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit. Space you didn't ask for, space you didn't want, space you resented at first. But heaven looked at that space and saw something different. Capacity. Capacity to heal. Capacity to listen. Capacity to grow. Capacity to try things you were too distracted to try. Capacity to hear God more clearly than you ever did while your heart was busy chasing their presence. Their absence became the room where new things could finally be born. Ideas that had been waiting in the dark. Callings that had been whispering for years. Dreams you had buried under someday. Gifts you had pushed aside because you were always emotionally tired. Slowly, God began to fill the empty space with Himself, with new desires, new directions, new clarity, new convictions, new relationships that aligned with your growth, not your wounds. What looked like an ending became the opening chapter of a life more aligned with who you really are. You thought losing them left a hole in your story, but heaven knew it cleared a field for your calling to finally take root. One day, you will look at what God built in that space, the healing, the assignments, the peace, the purpose, and realize, if they hadn't left, you never would have become who you are now. One of the quiet fears you carried after they left was this: will I ever find people like that again? Not perfect people, but people you could talk to, laugh with, trust, share your heart with without feeling like too much. When a significant person leaves, it can feel like they took the entire possibility of connection with them. You begin to believe that no one else will understand you like that. No one else will see you that deeply. No one else will fit your soul in quite the same way. But heaven knows something your fear doesn't. Their exit was not the end of your story with people. It was the clearing of the stage for new people who are actually aligned with who you are becoming. Because as long as your life was built around them, there wasn't much room for anyone else to truly enter. Your emotional energy was tied to one place. Your attention was pulled in one direction. Your capacity was spent on trying to keep one connection alive. So when they left, it felt like you were left with nothing. But heaven saw it as making space for what was still to come. No one will ever replace them, because people are not replacements. Each soul is unique, but God will send what your heart still needs. People who match your growth, not your old wounds. People who communicate clearly, not make you guess how they feel. People who protect your heart, not just enjoy your presence. People who show up consistently, not only when it benefits them. They will not arrive all at once. Some will come as friends, some as mentors, some as partners in purpose, some as answers to prayers you stopped praying. You will begin to notice conversations that feel safe, moments that feel peaceful, connections that don't drain you but fuel you. And slowly, you will realize something sacred. God did not just remove, He also replaced. Not the person, but the function they held in your life, this time in healthier hands. The leaving was never the final chapter. It was the turning of a page. And on the new pages, God is writing names, faces, voices that will walk with you in a way the old ones never could. People who will not hold you back from your calling, but walk beside you as you grow into it. One day, you will look around and whisper, I thought I lost everything, but God gave me better than I knew to ask for. There will come a day when you look back on this chapter with different eyes, not the eyes that are crying now, not the eyes that are tired from missing them, not the eyes that still replay what you could have said, what you could have done, how you could have fixed it. No, you will look back with healed eyes, and healed eyes see differently. You will remember how heavy you felt while they were still in your life, how often you questioned yourself, how often you doubted where you stood, how often you felt like you were trying harder than the connection deserved. You will remember the anxiety you called overthinking, the tension you called normal, the sadness you called love, the exhaustion you called loyalty. You will look at old versions of yourself and see how much you were bending to make something work that was quietly breaking you. And then you will look at who you've become since they left. You'll notice your mind is clearer, your heart is steadier, your sleep is deeper, your spirit is calmer. You'll notice you no longer walk with that constant tightness in your chest. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth to someone. You no longer beg for the bare minimum and call it grace. And in that quiet, honest moment, you will realize something holy. You weren't just hurt by their leaving, you were healed by it. If they had stayed, you would have stayed too. Stayed in patterns that were killing your peace. Stayed in cycles that were shrinking your soul. Stayed in a life where being chosen cost you yourself. Losing them forced you to confront the places where you had abandoned yourself to keep them. It pushed you back into your own arms, back into God's arms. Back into alignment with who you are, when you're not constantly afraid of being too much or not enough. And on that day, you won't just say, I survived. You'll say, I was saved. Not saved from them as a person, but saved from the version of life you would have lived If they had stayed, you will finally see that what felt like the worst day of your life was actually the day God shifted your future back into His hands. And deep in your spirit, with no anger, no bitterness, just understanding, you will whisper, "Losing you is how I found myself again." There will come a day when you no longer tell this story from the place of loss, but from the place of revelation. You won't just say, "They left." You'll say, "God moved." You'll look back and see how carefully heaven handled your heart, even when you thought you'd been abandoned. You'll see how every unanswered message, every conversation that faded, every door that closed, every distance that grew, was not the universe ignoring you. It was God intervening. Not because that person was pure harm, but because your heart is pure value. He refused to let your future be built around someone who could not walk with the weight of who you are becoming. You will see that the tears you cried watered the ground for the life you are living now. A life where your peace is not negotiable, where your worth is not up for debate, where your love is not poured into emptiness, but into places that pour back. You will realize that heaven was never trying to take love from you. It was trying to protect love inside you. The softness, the kindness, the sensitivity, the loyalty, the hope. The parts of you the wrong person would have mishandled until you no longer recognized yourself. God removed them so you could still be you. And the same God who allowed that ending is the one still writing your next beginning. He is not done with your story. He is not finished with your heart. He is not late. He is not absent. He is not indifferent. He is preparing people, moments, assignments, and a kind of love that will not require you to abandon yourself to be chosen. One day, you will look at the life He wrote on the other side of that goodbye. The peace, the clarity, the purpose, the relationships that honor you. And you will breathe deeper than you ever did when you were trying to hold on. And with a healed, steady heart, you will finally say, "Thank you, God, for every person you removed, and for never letting their exit be the end of my story." Because it never was, and it never will be. If this message spoke to your spirit today, don't walk this journey alone. Stay with us here on Divine Frequency, where every film is a quiet conversation between your heart and heaven. Subscribe, stay close, and let God keep writing the parts of your story you once thought were over.